Good morning, everybody. It is just about 5 o'clock in the morning on August 21st, 2019. This is the final comparison between the HD800 and the ZMF Aeolus. Today, we are comparing the treble region between these two headphones. Now, we know that the Aeolus has a significantly smoother sound signature than the HD 800 or 700, excuse me, and that the 700 has an open, airier, if not more resolving, certainly more energetic sound signature. But with that energy also comes the threat of too much treble. Indeed, the 700 does tend to suffer a little bit from higher peakiness than other headphones. It's more like the HD 800 issues, where the 800 was way too peaky for some people, and it was such a significant downgrade to previous Sennheiser headphones that people went out and got modifications. And there is, in fact, a modification for the HD700 called the Aeolus mod. This would theoretically fix or reduce the peakiness of the HD700, just as this particular mod fixed the peakiness of the HD800. So today we want to find out how peaky these headphones are, and if you are a treble friendly person, if you like treble, is it the type of peakiness that becomes ear piercing, or is it the type of peakiness that has a lot of energy and can be controlled with the volume knob? Or if you're the type of person that simply hates treble and never wants to have any treble, then whether the HD700 is something that you should completely ignore and instead opt for the Aeolus if you're comparing these two. So let's get started. I have my test playlist. We're going to start with Scherzo for X-Wings. It's an orchestral piece. It has a lot of string instruments, brass instruments, wind instruments, and this could get peaky really fast. So we're going to start with the Aeolus. We're going to start with the volume at about 12 o'clock. Here we go. When the music starts, it comes out full blast, no peakiness at all. By the way, I'm using the Rupert Neve amplifier plugged into the JDS Labs L DAC. All the instruments are playing. You have, I think, there's a bass instrument in the background that has this undertone that doesn't seem to interfere with anything else. Horns are playing at this juncture. No peakiness. Very smooth. I'm going to increase the volume to 1 o'clock. Increase to 1 o'clock. Incredibly smooth. No ear piercingness. No treble. I mean, there is treble, it's just not trebly. Yeah, it's incredibly smooth and easy listening headphone. With this song, no issues with the Aeolus. I could sit here and listen to the song on the Aeolus for hours at high volume, and I would get tired of this song before I would get hurt from listening to this song. Let's switch to the 700. Okay, I have the 700 on my head. Let's start again. Volume is at noon. Open, airier. I'm going to increase the volume to about 1 o'clock. Oh, that's a lot of energy in the wind instrument. The one difference that comes out immediately is just that the 700 provides substantially more energy in the treble than the Aeolus. Combine that with the additional width, more airiness of the 700, and you have not only a wider soundstage, but better presence of all the instruments, better separation of all the instruments than the Aeolus. And so far, I wouldn't say that the 700 is ear piercing, even at 1 o'clock. It just has a lot of energy. I'm going to increase the volume to 2 o'clock. Yeah, right there. So right about 1 minute and 25 seconds, there's a horn instrument or a wind instrument that goes da 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 da, and it's that part that can get really ear piercy. At 2 o'clock on the Rupert Neve, it didn't become ear piercing. It just has a lot of energy, much more energy than the Aeolus. Now, some people may find it too harsh, and I understand that. It's all a personal preference. You may very much dislike any hint of sibilance and any hint of treble. Unfortunately, if you cut off the treble, you're cutting off a whole lot of detail in the song. The Aeolus, it doesn't cut off detail as much as it cuts off energy. And making things as smooth as the Aeolus does is not always a benefit. Why did I say benefact? It's not always, it's 5 o'clock. It's not always a benefit to the song or to the person wearing the headphone. Oftentimes you want that energy because you want to get immersed in the song. When you take away that energy, it seems almost as if you're not as involved in the song. You're passively being fed the song. And yes, you're wearing headphones, and yes, it's a very much a passive experience. But with headphones that have more energy, more width, more soundstage, you feel surrounded by the song, and that immerses you more than it would with something like the Aeolus. Let's go to something else. Let's go to Flight from the City by Johan Johansson. This is a piano-centric song. Let's see if the 700 gets peaky. Here we go. Volume is at noon. It's a very wide, airy presentation of the piano. Smooth. No muffled sound signature, no distortion. You could hear this background, I don't know what it is. I think it's a cello or a violin. It's a very high frequency, doesn't interfere with the song, and is not trebly. It's not ear piercing. Let's skip ahead to about halfway. And now we have the other string instruments with the piano. No treble irritation at all. No discomfort in my ears. There's energy there, but it's not hurting energy. Let's increase the volume to about 1 o'clock. Going from 12 to 1 o'clock brings up that energy a bit more. And right here, if we go to about 3 minutes and 55 seconds or so, there's there's a string instrument that gets really peaky, gets way up there, but it still isn't trebly for me. It's not ear piercing for me. I can feel the energy, and if we keep cranking up the volume, then yes, it will definitely get too trebly for me. It'll get ear piercing. Let's pinpoint that portion. Let's start again. I'm going to start at 351, and I think it was at 355. Yeah, it's 355, and it's not a string instrument. It's a bell of some sort. And it goes ding, 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 and it gets really in the high registers. Really in the high registers. It gets into the high registers at 355. And if you are very treble sensitive, this is probably going to irritate you. At 1 o'clock on the Rupert Neve, which is exceptionally loud, it's not ear piercing for me. I can feel all of that energy, and if we keep cranking up the volume, I'm sure there'll be a point where it'll become uncomfortable. Let's go to, let's not do that. Let's go to the Aeolus. Here we go. Volume is back to 12 o'clock. You know, there's this kind of weird ringing sensation with the Aeolus where you put them on after putting on the 700 and it feels so closed off that just for the briefest moment there's a bit of ringing, and that could just be me because I went from the 700 to the Aeolus, an open headphone to a very closed headphone. That higher frequency, that string instrument, about between 40 and 50 seconds, is not particularly defined. On the 700, it was you could clearly hear it, and it wasn't interfering with anything. And on this Aeolus, it just sounds really muffled, and it doesn't have its own character. It melds too much with the piano, which, by the way, sounds muffled as well. Let's skip to halfway. Very smooth top end. You have the string instruments. I think it's a violin right now. That is really smooth. No harshness. But there's no air in the song either. And I don't think that there's at any point in the song where it'll get too harsh. I'll increase the volume to about 2 o'clock. It's at 2 o'clock now. So we're at that point again with the bells that can get really harsh. And at 2 o'clock on the Rupert Neve, it doesn't. Let's go back to 250 and listen for the bells. There is some energy there, but it's a very different characteristic than on the 700, where the 700 has all of that air and energy up top, that the potential for ear piercingness, too much treble, is present. With the Aeolus at 2 o'clock on the Rupert Neve, it sounds really muffled in comparison. And on top of that, it simply doesn't have the same type of energy. It's like taking a pointed stick and and grinding it down so it just becomes a rounded end, right? It's not pointed anymore. It's like when you're writing with the pencil and there's a point at which when you've been using the pencil, you need to sharpen it again. Well, the point at which you need to sharpen it again is the Aeolus. That's how it treats the treble. It just, there's nothing there. It's not a blunt, it's a blunt object instead of a stabbing instrument. Whereas with the 700, it keeps that pencil, that stabbing instrument sharp. And how you use it is really up to you. But with the Aeolus, no matter how you use it, it's never going to become a stabbing implement anymore. Let's go to 1,000 Years by the Piano Guys, back to 12 o'clock on the Aeolus. There are supposed to be two pianos, and I hear one that may have been copied and pasted on itself. It's not particularly differentiated. This is the cello playing, very smooth, but the piano becomes pretty muffled. The lack of air is not helpful in this song. Now it's just the piano, one of the pianos playing at the higher register. And the thing is, it sounds really smooth, but it's missing something. It's a taste thing, and it comes down to personal preference. But that muffled sound character of the Aeolus, when it's making everything smooth, for me, takes away from the piano. And it doesn't really sound like a piano. It just sounds like a piano with a mattress stuffed on top of it, and now you can't hear anything. You can't hear the piano. You're hearing something else. Smooth, but not particularly enjoyable for me. Okay, let's switch to the 700. All right, we have the 700 on, still at noon. Here we go. And I can hear two pianos. The cello is playing very smooth, clearly differentiated from the piano. There's no harshness, clear separation between the piano and the cello, no muddiness. There's still some energy left in the piano when it goes dun dun around 52 seconds of the song. Whereas on the Aeolus, it sounded really blunted and muffled. That open, airy nature of the 700 carries the piano frequency in the higher register a little bit further. Not that there's more resonance, but just that it has more energy behind the song. And it sounds, in my opinion, it sounds more natural. It's as if you're sitting, 2 rows back from the piano, whereas with the Aeolus, it sounded like you were sitting, the first row, but you had a comforter draped over your head, and you were listening to it muffled. I'm going to increase the volume to about 2 o'clock. It's at 2 o'clock now. Ooh, that's a lot of energy in the violin. but not ear piercing. Still quite smooth. The piano is very different. It has a different character than the violin, so there's different tonalities. No harshness at all. But you can feel that energy, and that if you keep cranking up the volume, you can make it very trebly. You can definitely get it to ear piercing if you put in the effort. Okay. Back to noon, and let's go to New Light by Kazuki, which has a lot of detail, layers and layers and layers and layers of detail. I have the HD700 on my head, and let's find out if it presents detail. Here we go. Song starts off with this very low rumble that doesn't interfere with the rest of the frequency. I could hear the wind. I could hear the person walking in the grass very clearly. I could hear the kids in the background. The walking is so very crystal clear. And the walking sound is in the left ear cup. Wow. I am surprised that the amount of detail I can hear with the 700 on this song. I can hear all the layers. The guitar is not interfering with anything else. Very different tonality from all the other layers of detail. Open, airy, quite resolving. Meaning all the details are defined. No muddiness. Okay, so let's switch to the Aeolus. And here we go. I have not changed the volume. Very closed off experience in comparison. I could hear the kids in the background. They're much more muffled. I can barely hear the wind. And the walking sound in the left ear cup is significantly more muffled than on the 700. If you didn't know to look for it, you would definitely miss it. The low rumbly bass doesn't interfere with anything. Neither does the guitar or the piano. No peakiness. But there's also really no air, no width to the song. Okay, so here's the thing. I don't think that the Aeolus is a bad headphone to use on songs like New Light. It's just not particularly good. The lack of width, the lack of air, the lack of resolution to bring out all the details clearly is a detriment. It's smooth, but this type of song really doesn't fit well with smoothness. You instead probably need a headphone that is wide and resolving and can bring out all the details. And if it gets a little trebly, then you have the volume control to try to bring it down a little bit so it doesn't become too ear piercing, or you can EQ. But a song like this simply does not do well with the blunting effect, where it rolls off all the higher frequencies and everything is smooth. It's got that veneer. You lose a lot of that detail and the separation of the instruments when you do that. So between the two, I have to say, in my personal preference, the HD700 clearly wins with this particular song. Let's listen to one last thing, and that would be The Big Ship by Brian Eno. A subscriber suggested this song on his own test playlist, and I particularly liked it. So let's listen to it on the Aeolus. Volume is at noon. Starts off with a string instrument. And it builds up. It's a really interesting build up. And I don't know what that there's a background buzz, electronic buzz that comes in. It could be an organ of some sort that's just been processed, or it could be a string instrument. I really don't know, but it's a really cool sound. Along with that, there's this it sounds like somebody's tapping on the bass of a guitar, right? The wood portion of a guitar. And right around here, about 1 minute, it starts peaking higher and higher. No treble issues, no harshness, no ear piercing. And let's go to the 700. By the way, if you get a chance, listen to this song. It's a really, really good song. It's plenty of detail, and this is the type of song that should provide a test of verticality, because the way that the volume increases and the way that the instruments are mixed in, it's not just left and right, it's also verticality. Okay, so let's go with the 700. Drastically different presentations of the song, closed off versus open as can be. And I could hear more detail from the 700, more definition. The clacking sound I didn't hear before. There's a clacking sound along with it's the same sound as if somebody's hitting on a guitar. There's thumping on a guitar. On the Aeolus, it sounded more muffled, as if it was definitely a guitar they were thumping on, whereas on the 700, it's much more lean presentation, and I can't say if it was really somebody thumping on the guitar. Here's all that energy. Still no ear piercingness. I'll increase the volume to about 2 o'clock. Still no ear piercingness. I could feel that energy, and if we keep pushing it, then yes, it'll get very uncomfortable. But at this juncture, at 1 minute and 25 seconds, when all of that mix is now into the song and the volume is reaching its peak at 2 o'clock on the Rupert Neve, it's a fairly pleasant experience. This is probably close to my threshold, but this is also the loudest I would probably listen to the song. Excellent resolution, and there seems to be verticality. It's not just left and right, but it seems that there's some of the instruments are right on top of my head. Okay. Excellent song to listen to if you get a chance, and the subscriber who recommended this song on his test playlist, thank you so much. This is fantastic. Bottom line, the treble, I don't find the HD700 to have a treble issue like other people do. Now, I don't know what the test parameters were for people who've experienced the 700 issues, right, and the 800 issues. I can't say. It's possible that these individuals were listening to really peaky songs, like you're listening to death metal, or you're listening at extremely loud volumes, and all of that sort of stuff contributes to whether or not you're going to experience treble. And I don't know what those people did. In my test, I have it at a reasonable volume, and even at 1 or 2 o'clock on the Rupert Neve, it's really loud for me, and I didn't feel any treble issues. It wasn't as if my ears started hurting or I definitely couldn't listen to it anymore. I mean, there were portions in some of these songs where I said, look, this is probably my limit, but it's also my limit to listen to the song. I wouldn't listen to it any louder. The people who are concerned about treble have to define what exactly they're listening to and at what volumes they're going to listen. It's absolutely possible that there are frequencies that this headphone reproduces that some people will find irritating. And I can't tell you what that's going to be for you. It could be, it could be in the 10,000 hertz region. It could be 8,000 hertz. It could be 6,000 hertz. I don't know. It's up to you, your particular preference. But until you actually put on the headphones and you listen to it the way you would listen to it under normal conditions, only then will you really know if it's hurtful to you. My experience, knowing that I am pretty treble sensitive, I don't have any issues with the 700. This is not this mod is not something that I would rush out and try to make. I don't think that the 700 for me and my listening preferences, the things I listen to with the devices that I have, requires any adjustment. Now, when we talk about the Aeolus, I gotta be honest, the Aeolus cannot be the end-all be-all. It simply isn't. The lack of air, the lack of width, and the muffled sound signature that comes with the closed-off nature is simply, it's off-putting with some songs. Not for every song, but with some songs. And if it's off-putting for some songs, that means it will definitely be off-putting to some people across the board. Like there will be nothing that they like with the Aeolus with, because it simply doesn't reproduce the song that they want to hear. Because you have two very different sound signatures from these headphones, closed off, incredibly intimate, and I would say the best way to describe it is muffled, compared to the 700, which is very open, energetic, and you can eke out some of that extra detail and separation in the songs because of that width and openness. But you lose out on the warmth of the song that the Aeolus does, in fact, provide. And you miss out on the exceptional smoothness across the board that the Aeolus provides. Well, that's my treble test. My next video is going to be about a summary between these two headphones' sound signature, and hopefully that will help you decide whether you like the 700 signature or you like the Aeolus. I hope you all have a wonderful day. I was going to say night, but it's day. And enjoy the end of your week and roll easily into your weekend. Have a wonderful day.